Hello students, welcome back to our discussion of Chapter 7, Foreign Direct Investment. Here, nice information about the growth of outflows in terms of billions of dollars. Up to 2015, 1.5 trillion or so. Just some information you can read on your own time. Same thing here. Since World War II, the United States has been the largest source country of foreign direct investment. The source being the country that sends money or sends investment opportunities out. Other important source countries include United Kingdom, France, Japan. According to this chart, China, number one source country, United States, and then India, representing just over about 30% of the source foreign direct investment. So just to put everything into perspective, and Canada is right there, number 16, unchanged. If we round up, that's about 10. If we don't round up, that's about 7, maybe 8. Let's go into forms of foreign direct investment. Some of this stuff we'll cover in later chapters as well. But as it says there, foreign direct investment can take the form of acquisitions or mergers. So Canadian Tire, when they went into Texas, they acquired White stores. Burger King and Tim Hortons, they merged. Target, when they took over Zellers, well, that's an acquisition. And there's benefits for both, but generally firms prefer to acquire existing assets because mergers and acquisitions are much quicker to execute. They are easier, there's less risk, and it has that management belief that if they can just do better, then perhaps they can make this business in this market work. So they believe that they can generally increase the efficiencies of that acquired business. Mergers usually have an inside person who knows the country's economic, political, legal systems and understands the culture and the language. Things you did in your first assignment, covering those topics, as well as what you'll be doing in the case report as well. So it is important to have a fair understanding of the country's economic, political, legal systems. Something that Target really messed up on. I believe I've shared some articles about Target in the past. They really messed up on understanding the Canadian pharmaceutical industry and regulations. They just assumed that it would be the same as they have it in the States, which is definitely not true. So greenfield investment, what that means, basically at one time there's a greenfield and now there's a business to it. Now there's a business on that land. So that's why it's called a greenfield investment. Nothing there at the beginning. You go in there and you create something brand new. Canada's case, FDI flows into Canada. Basically, as it's saying there, foreign direct investment inflows and outflows remain promising for Canada. Not sure what's happening now with all of this COVID economic phase we are in, but the world's in the same thing too. For the most part, Canadian gains in FDI outflow are due to the rise of Canadian affiliates and subsidiaries in the United States. So Canadian businesses in the U.S. Accounting for some significant FDI outflow. So we're going to get into a couple theories or a couple alternates first. Alternatives for foreign and direct investment. So the question is, why take that risk to invest in a new nation, into a different nation, a foreign market, setting up shop there, instead of perhaps just exporting or just continuing on with the licensing process? This question is quite important because there are some risks and benefits for both, especially with that foreign direct investment. Exporting, of course, we are, as a nation or as a business, exporting, just sending your products overseas across the border, and basically that's the totality of the risk involved. So why foreign direct investment? It is expensive, as it says, and there is risks associated with moving into a new market, different culture, different rules of the game. That's why this course starts off with the discussion of the political, economic, legal systems, talks about the cultural differences as well. Those are some things that one may overlook, and there's lots of examples. Target is the best example of a business that just overlooked the different political, economic, legal differences, especially with the pharmacy, as I mentioned. They did not appreciate the difference in the cultural differences manifested in our consumption patterns. And there's examples of Target assuming that the Texas consumer or the Alberta consumer would be the same as the Texas consumer. So let's send up a whole bunch of charcoal barbecues and briquettes, because that's what happens in Texas. Therefore, Alberta has oil, Texas has oil, so it must be the same. The consumer must be the same. So they really messed up, and it cost them a lot of money. If they had only done some really basic investigative work, looking at the difference, political, economic, legal, cultural differences, it would have saved some money. And perhaps we would still have Target up here. So it is risky, but there are some, with that risk comes some significant payoffs as well. So this slide discusses some limitations of exporting and limitations of licensing. So basically, because of these limitations, it makes foreign direct investment that much more popular or significant. So the big limitations to exporting is it's constrained by transportation costs and trade barriers. So trade barriers can be enacted fast and without warning. So one day you're sending product across the border, the next day there's either tariffs or there's quotas or there's some administrative policy that's preventing you from exporting. So now you can't sell your product over the border. Transportation costs are significant as well, and it gets into some differences in terms of products of low value to weight and products with high value to weight. Products of low value to weight basically meaning that you might as well just produce it in that foreign location. Products with high value to weight ratio, electronics, medical equipment, produce it at one place and then transport it elsewhere, because the costs are very minor compared to the total cost of the product. Limitations of licensing as well. Internalization theory explains basically why they would prefer foreign direct investment over licensing as that strategy, because it may result in that firm giving away valuable technological know-how to that potential foreign competitor, even though that licensing agreement would say that so much of the revenue or sales as a percentage has to come back to you as that business that have granted that license. Once the license expires, the other business may not stop producing your product, or they may just continue it in under a different name, for example. It all depends on the legal risks associated with doing business in that country. So you lose tight control over manufacturing, marketing, strategy in that foreign market. Basically, you're telling a business in a foreign country, you can produce our product legally, for a certain number of years, pay us a few percentage on the revenue, for example, and you basically tell them how to produce it. So after that contract expires, you do lose some. There's that risk associated with it. Competitive advantage as well. So those are some of the risks of exporting and licensing, which makes foreign direct investment that much more strong in terms of choosing FDI. For exporting, basically you choose FDI because now you are in that nation, so your products are not viewed as imports for that nation. You are basically selling a locally produced product in that foreign country, even though you are a foreign business. So your product is already there, so there's no transportation costs, there's no trade barriers. Foreign direct investment also reduces the limitations of licensing because you are in that country, you are the one producing your product, you're not giving away any of your competitive advantage or your control or your know-how. So those are some of the reasons why you would want to perhaps engage in that FDI. Basically redundant slide from the previous slide. Let's go on to here. Patterns of foreign direct investment. There are two theories that attempt to explain the pattern of foreign direct investment. The first one is that strategic behavior theory. It's basically a reflection of strategic rivalry between firms. Knickerbocker looked at the relationship between foreign direct investment and rivalry in oligopolistic industries, generally stating that firms are interdependent. What one firm does has an immediate impact on the competitors. One firm perhaps makes a decision to expand, the other firms in that industry will also quickly make a decision to expand, maybe not in the same market, but somewhere, in order to stay competitive. The multi-point competition is outlined in that strategic behavior theory, basically saying that the firms will match each other's moves in different markets to try to hold each other in check. So one company might have expanded into France, for example. Another company, Canadian company, might decide to expand into Germany, basically gaining the same type of sales and revenues. So one company isn't gaining more revenue, more profits than their competitors if they both decide to expand into different markets. The product life cycle, this is based on Vernon's theory that we just discussed in Chapter 5, basically stating that firms invest in other advanced countries where local demand grows enough to support local production. Basically, then they shift production to developing countries, especially when product standardization and market saturation give rise to the price competition and cost pressures. Because of that cost pressure, they have to move somewhere. So then they expand. Eclectic paradigm, location-specific advantage. Dunning argues, in relation to the various factors discussed, location-specific advantages are very important in explaining the rationale and direction of foreign direct investment. These advantages arise from using the resource endowments or assets, factor endowments, in that particular foreign location. So he's arguing that is why firms invest in certain markets and countries, is because they have an abundance of natural resources that can be used to make their product. So we'll come back in the next video to discuss the political environment for foreign direct investment.